Jeremy Rys opens the discussion by tracing Jeffrey Epstein's origins and the extensive network that supported his rise. Epstein was not merely a wealthy financier, but an access agent deeply embedded in intelligence operations, particularly linked to Israeli intelligence. His connections extended back to the Iran-Contra era, with ties to the Safari Club, a private intelligence group that emerged after the CIA was temporarily shut down in the 1970s. This network included powerful families like the Bronmans, who amassed wealth during Prohibition and maintained influence through covert operations. Rys highlights how Epstein's role was to gather compromising material, blackmail, on elite figures worldwide, including politicians and businessmen. This blackmail was a strategic tool to maintain control and power. The guest explains that the hard drives containing this compromising footage are likely held in Israel, not accessible to American authorities like Pam Bondi, despite public assumptions. Epstein's network was a cog in a much larger machine of espionage, organized crime, and political manipulation, which also connects to other major historical events. The conversation delves into the JFK assassination, revealing how it intertwines with Epstein's network and broader intelligence operations. Rys discusses key figures such as Jack Alustin Kaidion and George H.W. Bush, who were connected to the Dallas police and intelligence communities involved in the assassination plot. The Bay of Pigs operatives, angry at Kennedy for the failed invasion, also played a role in the conspiracy, with Bush owning the Zapata oil platforms used as staging grounds. Rys further explains the involvement of individuals like D. Harold Bird, who owned the Texas School Book Depository, and Ruth Payne, Oswald's landlady, who had ties to the conspirators. The guest stresses that many files remain sealed because key witnesses and participants are still alive. The JFK files, much like the Epstein files, are part of a long history of government cover-ups designed to protect elite interests and prevent the truth from emerging. Rys presents a detailed analysis of the 9/11 attacks, emphasizing the financial and intelligence dimensions often overlooked. He points out that several CEOs who worked in the World Trade Center missed work on the day of the attacks, including Howard Lutnick, who owned a house next to Epstein's New York property. Lutnick's company, Cantor Fitzgerald, suffered massive losses, and his suspicious absence raises questions about foreknowledge. The guest also discusses the role of insurance companies like AIG, which insured the towers against terrorist attacks shortly before 9/11, and the suspicious stock trades involving put options on airline stocks. The security systems of the towers were managed by companies linked to the family, and the Pentagon's refurbishment contracts were awarded to firms connected to Donald Rumsfeld. Rys argues that 9/11 was not just a terrorist attack, but a complex inside job involving financial manipulation and intelligence complicity. The podcast shifts focus to UFOs and government disclosure efforts, with Rys expressing skepticism about official narratives. He critiques the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, and the limited hangout operations designed to control the UFO narrative. The guest highlights the role of figures like Lou Alzondo, a former Pentagon official with a controversial background in torture programs, who was positioned as a public face of UFO investigations, but whose credibility is questioned. Rys also discusses the infiltration of the UFO community by intelligence operatives and disinformation campaigns, including the promotion of figures like Jeremy Corbell, who allegedly suppresses dissenting voices. The guest stresses that while some genuine research exists, much of the public discourse is manipulated to mislead and distract from the real classified technologies and phenomena. A significant portion of the conversation is dedicated to anti-gravity research and the controversial figure Bob Lazar. Rys dismisses Lazar's claims of working at Area 51, asserting that Lazar was never at the secret base, but rather at Los Alamos and involved in dubious activities such as running brothels and criminal enterprises. Lazar's story, according to Rys, is an elaborate fabrication maintained over decades, possibly as a disinformation tool. Despite this, Rys acknowledges the existence of genuine anti-gravity research dating back to the 1950s, including the baffled Brown effect, which has been experimentally demonstrated to produce thrust in a vacuum, defying conventional explanations. Epstein's interest in gravity and physics is linked to these secret programs, which involve top scientists and classified projects. The guest emphasizes the difficulty of replicating and publicly disclosing such technologies due to government suppression. Returning to Epstein, Rys elaborates on the nature of the files and their significance. The files reportedly contain extensive compromising material on powerful individuals, including politicians, businessmen, and celebrities. The guest explains that the files are a form of ultimate leverage, preventing anyone from exposing the network without risking their own downfall. Rys speculates that the files are securely held in Israel, inaccessible to American authorities, and that attempts to release them publicly have been thwarted. He also discusses the role of figures like Howard Lutnick, who appears to be protecting the secrecy surrounding Epstein's operations. The guest suggests that the files' release could trigger massive political upheaval, which is why they remain tightly controlled. The podcast touches on the influence of technology companies like Google and social media platforms in shaping public perception. Rys references research by Robert Epstein, who demonstrated algorithmic bias in search results, favoring left-wing narratives and suppressing conservative or alternative viewpoints. This manipulation extends to shadow banning and censorship of content related to Epstein, UFOs, and other sensitive topics. Rys also discusses the use of AI and large language models, noting that these systems are programmed to avoid certain topics or provide sanitized answers, effectively controlling the flow of information. The guest warns that this technological gatekeeping is a modern extension of traditional censorship, making it harder for the public to access unfiltered truth. An intriguing subject covered is the manipulation of scientific research and peer review processes. Rys explains how Robert Maxwell, Epstein's mentor, controlled scientific publishing through Pergamon Press, shaping what research was accepted and disseminated. This control allowed intelligence agencies to suppress disruptive scientific discoveries, particularly in physics and propulsion. The guest highlights the involvement of prominent scientists like Lawrence Krauss and Kip Thorne, who were connected to Epstein's network. He suggests that science itself has been weaponized as a tool of control, with peer review serving as a gatekeeping mechanism to prevent revolutionary technologies from reaching the public domain. Throughout the discussion, Rys weaves in historical conspiracies involving secret societies, intelligence agencies, and elite families. He references the Iran-Contra affair, the Safari Club, and the continuity of government programs designed to maintain power behind the scenes. The guest also touches on the role of the Bush family and their connections to intelligence and financial networks. Rys argues that these secretive groups have operated for decades, orchestrating events like JFK's assassination and 9/11 to consolidate control. He stresses that understanding these historical conspiracies is essential to grasping the current state of global power and the ongoing cover-ups. The podcast addresses the challenges posed by disinformation, conspiracy theories, and public skepticism. Rys acknowledges the difficulty in discerning truth amid a sea of conflicting narratives and deliberate misinformation. He notes that terms like conspiracy theory have been weaponized to discredit legitimate inquiries. The guest reflects on the social dynamics of distrust, explaining how even well-intentioned researchers are often accused of being intelligence assets or disinformation agents. He emphasizes the need for critical thinking, scientific rigor, and open dialogue to navigate this complex landscape. Looking forward, Rys discusses the prospects for disclosure of UFOs, anti-gravity, and other suppressed technologies. He expresses hope that independent scientific efforts, like those of his group and the APEC conference, can break through government secrecy. The guest outlines the challenges of releasing such technologies, including legal restrictions like ITAR and the risk of suppression by powerful interests. Rys envisions a future where humanity can harness these advanced technologies for space exploration and sustainability, moving beyond fossil fuels and traditional propulsion. He stresses the importance of transparency and collaboration to achieve this vision and warns of the dangers posed by entrenched elites who seek to maintain control.